Alright, so you clicked on this video because you've been seeing Luigi Mangione's name all over the news lately. You might already know the basics. He's the guy charged with the shocking, premeditated murder of a United Healthcare CEO. It's a story that seems ripped straight out of a dystopian headline. Someone who allegedly developed an intense vendetta against the healthcare system, culminating in a horrific crime. And if you're watching this, you're probably asking yourself, how did we get here? Why is this one individual's story captivating so many people right now? And more importantly, how does a seemingly normal person become radicalized in the digital age? In a few minutes, I'm going to share something truly unsettling about the role that social media algorithms may have played in this tragic chain of events. Right now, you're living in the most overwhelming period of human history. You've got breaking news, hot takes, memes, and vitriol hitting you from every angle. It's not just random content, it's engineered content designed to keep you hooked. We're gonna dive deep into how that endless stream of digital stimulation affects us, how it can warp someone's worldview, and in extreme cases, push them into acts of real-world violence. Before we do that, let's just acknowledge that you're not alone in feeling oversaturated with information. In fact, this constant digital bombardment is at the heart of how individuals, including Mangione, have become fixated on certain issues to the point of obsession. The world we inhabit now is a place where the internet's infinite scroll can feed whatever bias, interest, or fear you have, and feed it more aggressively than you ever asked for. You get recommended videos, articles, posts. The next suggested video starts before you've made a conscious decision to watch it. The feeling of being bombarded with content is universal, but the Luigi Mangione story is not just about a single crime. It's about a deeper shift, something that's been going on inside people's minds as algorithms specifically designed for maximum engagement start to shape their beliefs, fears, and ultimately their actions. The question is, how do we even begin to dissect this chain reaction? Let's take a moment to ground ourselves. In a few minutes, I'll get into the nitty-gritty details of how Mangione's online consumption may have escalated his grievances against the healthcare system. And I'll share some direct comparisons with other known cases where digital radicalization occurred. You won't want to miss that, because it might fundamentally change the way you understand your own feed. But before we plunge further into this narrative, I want to do something a little unusual. Let's pause and take a slow breath and remind ourselves, you're in control of your attention. The content you watch, read, or listen to does not have to dictate your mental state. This video is going to guide you through some heavy concepts: psychological manipulation by algorithms, radicalization, and the overwhelming nature of the digital age. But remember, no matter how intense these topics get, you have the option to step back, breathe, and process. Take a breath right now. And with that breath, you're setting an intention. You're not just going to be a passive recipient of this information. You're going to actively think about how these systems operate, how they might influence you, and what you can do to reclaim your autonomy. Think about this. Every time you click like, every time you watch a certain type of video for longer than usual, the platform learns. It learns what grabs your attention. Over time, you're fed more of that. More outrage, more conspiracy, more anti-establishment rhetoric. Whatever gets your pulse up and your eyes glued. It's never neutral. It's never accidental. It's deliberate, because that's how these companies profit. They profit from your attention, from conflict, and sometimes from pushing content that can stroke fear or hatred. Now, imagine someone in physical pain or financial distress or facing bureaucratic nightmares within the healthcare system. Imagine that someone turns to the internet for help and validation. They start looking up stories of people frustrated with insurance companies, reading about corporate greed, injustices, or broken healthcare policies. The system notes their interest. Before long, suggestions appear that intensify the narrative. This whole healthcare system is rigged. These CEOs are evil. It's all part of a corrupt machine. If a person consumes that content in a vulnerable state, they might come to see these messages as undeniable truths. In a moment, I'm going to reveal a particular detail, a set of notes allegedly recovered from Mangione that shocked investigators and might shock you too. It shows just how deeply he internalized anti-corporate, anti-healthcare sentiments and how he rationalized his violent actions. But before we get there, it's essential to understand the process, how a feed of semi-random, profit-driven suggestions can push someone into a dangerous line. To understand how someone could become so fixated, let's use a simple analogy. Think about when you overeat at a holiday meal, stuffing yourself until you feel sick. You didn't choose to feel nauseated, but you kept going because the environment was set up that way. Abundant food, no barriers, barriers. Similarly, the digital environment you live in is filled with infinite mental junk food, conspiracy theories, inflammatory rants, sensationalist headlines. If you consume too much, your mind becomes bloated, numb, and potentially hostile. When Luigi Mangione allegedly targeted the United Healthcare executive, it wasn't just a random act. It was likely preceded by a long period of mental overconsumption, a diet of content that fed a narrative of extreme resentment. And this overconsumption didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in a digital space optimized to keep him engaged, pushing him to more extreme corners of discourse. Now, this is not to absolve personal responsibility. People make choices, and Mangione must face the consequences of his alleged actions. Understanding the role of algorithms can help us prevent future tragedies. Just as we don't blame the existence of sugar for obesity, but acknowledge that cheap, easily accessible junk food contributes significantly, we must acknowledge that algorithms contribute to radicalization. The next step, how do we protect ourselves? How do we ensure we don't get sucked into harmful rabbit holes? It's not about throwing your phone into the ocean or never using social media again. That's unrealistic. Instead, it's about conscious consumption, building mental resilience. In a few minutes, I'll share some concrete steps and mental frameworks that could have made a difference in cases like Mangione's, and can still make a difference in your life. Now, let's return to that disturbing detail I promised. According to multiple sources, Mangione left behind a notebook, a manifesto of sorts. Within it, he ranted about healthcare corruption, about corporate America's greed, about how America's healthcare rankings don't match up with its exorbitant costs. He allegedly reasoned that violence would be a more targeted way of drawing attention than peaceful protest or even bomb threats, which he rejected for fear of harming innocent bystanders. Think about that logic. He was searching for a form of action so twisted that, in his mind, it would feel justified. That's the kind of moral distortion that can happen when you're stuck in an echo chamber, repeatedly fed the idea that a certain group is not just flawed, but actively malevolent, deserving of punishment. This is not to say everyone exposed to radical content commits murder, far from it, but it shows how a combination of personal vulnerability and algorithmic reinforcement can create a uniquely dangerous mindset. So, what do we do about all this? We can't just live offline. The internet is integral to modern life, connecting us to information, communities, and opportunities. It's not the existence of social media or video platforms that's inherently the problem. It's our uncritical, passive consumption. To regain a sense of agency, we must adopt what I call conscious consumption. Conscious consumption means you don't scroll mindlessly. You pick and choose what you watch, read, and engage with. Instead of letting the algorithm decide what's next, you actively seek out high-quality sources. When you find yourself drifting into a cycle of negative, rage-inducing content, you pause and ask, is this helping me understand the world better, or is it just feeding my anger? This shift requires mental energy. It's like switching from a junk food diet to a healthy one. At first, it's uncomfortable. Your brain craves the cheap dopamine rush of outrage and scandal, but over time, you get used to more nuanced, thoughtful content. Before we go further into tips and techniques, let's remember that we are human beings with empathy, compassion, and the ability to see multiple perspectives. When radicalizing portray the other side as less than human, we must resist. Many perpetrators of extremist violence lose sight of the humanity in their perceived enemies. They start seeing them as symbols of corruption or evil and not as real people. To counter this, we need not just mental, but emotional resilience. Surround yourself with stories that highlight our shared humanity. Talk to real people who have different perspectives. Real conversations, yes, even online, can break through the dehumanizing narratives that bad actors and flawed algorithms amplify. If you've ever caught yourself sinking into a pit of negativity online, maybe you spent hours consuming content that made you angrier, more anxious, and more isolated, you'll know it feels terrible. Often, you emerge feeling drained, not enlightened. That's a sign you need to recalibrate. A good first step is to simply become aware of your emotions as you consume content. Are you feeling more hopeful, curious, and understanding, or more paranoid, hateful, and stressed? If it's the latter, take a break. Even stepping away for 5 minutes can help. Remember, you are in control. algorithm only has power if you let it run unchecked. In 2019, researchers documented how certain online communities, amplified by YouTube's recommendation system, led some individuals down paths of increasingly extreme ideologies. One particular user started off watching fairly innocuous political commentary, over months was nudged toward white nationalist content. While this person didn't commit a publicized crime, private communications revealed that their worldview had dramatically hardened. They now saw violence as a possible solution to political disputes. Thankfully, friends intervened before anything terrible happened. Why is this relevant? Because it shows that it's not just an isolated scenario involving Mangione and healthcare grievances. It's a general phenomena. The algorithm doesn't care what the content is. It just cares about time spent, clicks, and engagement. If it notices you linger on something extreme, it will show you more of it. Now, let's lay out a 4-part system to help prevent falling into destructive mindsets. Conscious consumption. Decide what you want to learn before you open the app. Instead of, I'm bored and let's see what's suggested, think, I'm curious about healthcare policy reform. Let me find a well-reviewed documentary or a balanced panel discussion. Critical reflection. After consuming a piece of content, reflect on it. Was it fair? Did it demonize an entire group without nuance? Did it rely on fear-mongering? If so, actively seek out more balanced sources next time. Creative output. Don't just consume. Produce something. Write a summary of what you learned. Share a thoughtful post discussing the nuances. Creativity grounds, makes you process information more deeply, and reduces the passive, addictive nature of scrolling. Community and connection. Engage with people who challenge your viewpoints in respectful ways. Join forums dedicated to constructive debate. If you see hateful or extremist rhetoric, don't swallow it. Interact with differing opinions and verify facts. Human relationships can cut through dehumanizing narratives. We talk a lot about exercising our bodies, but we also must exercise our minds to handle the digital onslaught. Just like you can't maintain physical health on junk food alone, you can't maintain mental health on a diet of extremist, anger-filled content. A balanced media diet includes multiple perspectives, careful fact-checking, and periods of rest from the noise. In a few minutes, we'll address a looming question. Should the platforms themselves bear responsibility for stories like Mangione's? Are we just pawns in a game they profit from? Or can we hold them accountable in some way? Keep watching, because the answer might surprise you and provide a blueprint for collective action. Right now, the culture of constant online stimulation makes it easy to forget who we are at our core. Values like empathy, fairness, intellectual honesty, and compassion can erode if we feed on a steady diet of divisive content. To reclaim these values, you must actively seek out content that uplifts, educates, and broadens your horizons. For example, suppose you find yourself drawn to stories of corruption in the healthcare industry, valid stories that highlight systemic issues. There's nothing wrong with being informed, but balance those stories with tales of innovation, people working to fix the system, patient advocacy groups making a difference, and doctors tirelessly serving underserved communities. By seeing the whole picture, you resist the narrative that demonizes everyone involved. Let's imagine an alternate scenario for Luigi Mangione. Let's say when he first became frustrated with the healthcare system due to his back injury or treatment difficulties, he joined an online support group of chronic pain sufferers. Suppose that group focused not just on blame, but on constructive solutions, discussing patient rights, highlighting resources for affordable care, and providing emotional support, instead of feeding him a constant stream of health CEOs are monsters. Maybe the environment would have guided him toward nonviolent activism, or at least a better understanding of why these systems are the way they are. Perhaps he would have found an outlet for his pain and frustration that didn't involve violence. It's tempting to think we're all just rats in a lab maze created by social media giants. While it's true that these platforms are manipulative, we are not helpless. We can install tools that limit our screen time, use browser extensions to block clickbait, follow newsletters and communities dedicated to social media literacy. All these steps help us reclaim autonomy. Now, back to that question of responsibility. Should YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, or X be held responsible for pushing someone toward extremism? Many would argue yes. After all, they designed these algorithms to maximize engagement, not truthfulness or mental health. In recent years, whistleblowers and investigations revealed internal memos showing that company leaders knew their algorithms were fostering polarization and hate, yet failed to act decisively. So, what What can we do? Regulation is complex. Talking about these issues openly is a start. Supporting legislation that demands transparency and recommendation algorithms, pressuring platforms to invest in human moderation, and fostering public discourse about ethical tech design. These can collectively nudge companies toward more responsible behavior. If we, as a society, begin to value platforms that respect user well-being over those that exploit it, market forces could shift. That's not easy. It would require a culture-wide conversation and consistent pressure, but it's possible. This is heavy stuff, and it's easy to feel hopeless. Don't. Humans are adaptable. Yes, we're confronted by immense challenges in the digital age: algorithmic manipulation, radicalization, misinformation, but we also have incredible tools. Free online courses teach media literacy. Collaborative fact-checking communities spring up every day. Journalists expose tech company wrongdoing. Regulators start to wake up. If we remain pragmatically optimistic, acknowledging the problem without giving in to despair, we can steer ourselves and our communities toward healthier information ecosystems. Right now, as you're watching, notice how you feel. Are you feeling more informed, more in control, maybe even a bit more hopeful that we're not doomed to repeat stories like Mangione's? That hope means you've already begun to reclaim some autonomy. You've engaged with a piece of content intentionally, thinking critically, instead of numbly scrolling. That's a small victory. Just like standing up and stretching after sitting too long can help your body reset, stepping back and reflecting after consuming intense content can help your mind reset. Now, let's get practical. When you notice yourself drawn into a vortex of content that keeps making you angrier and more hateful, try these steps. Stop and name the feeling. Acknowledge that you feel anger, resentment, or fear. Just labeling the emotion helps you regain a sense of control. Step away, close the tab, go for a short walk, drink water, give your brain a moment to process what you just experienced. Seek an opposite source. If you've been watching 30 minutes of anti-corporate rants, spend 5 minutes reading an article from a reputable investigative journalist who presents nuanced views. Even if you still disagree, seeing another perspective breaks the spell. Discuss with a friend, talk to someone you trust, ask them what they think. Human conversation often restores balance. Over time, these habits become second nature. You become resilient, less likely to be swayed by manipulative content. Mangione's case, as horrifying as it is, shines a light on a broader issue. He's not a complete aberration. He's a symptom of a digital environment rife with manipulative incentives. His alleged action was an extreme endpoint of a trajectory many start on. The vast majority never commit violence, but many do harbor more fear, hatred, and suspicion than they otherwise would. We must recognize this as a collective problem. Just as past generations dealt with propaganda via newspapers or biased television broadcasts, we must deal with algorithmic manipulation. Our tools are new, but the need for critical thinking and media literacy is eternal. Educators are incorporating media literacy into curricula. New platforms arise that prioritize user well-being. Imagine a feed that occasionally asks if you want to learn about the opposite viewpoint, or that you've been on a single topic for too long and might want to switch gears. Users can vote with their presence and attention, migrating to spaces that treat them like humans, not data points. Remember what we said earlier about platform responsibility and the possibility of collective action? It's already starting. International bodies are discussing new regulations. Some social media sites now warn users when they've read only one side of a story. Public outcry after events like Mangione's crime can pressure these platforms to prioritize safety and neutrality over profits. The road is long, but not endless. All this might sound ambitious, maybe even idealistic, but small changes at the individual level can ripple outward. Your decision to verify a claim instead of sharing it blindly, your refusal to watch the recommended extremist rant, your effort to maintain a balanced media diet, these acts shape the digital culture around you. They send signals to the algorithms, they influence your friends, and they gradually shift norms. Luigi Mangione stands accused of a heinous crime, reportedly fueled by hatred for a healthcare system he believed unjust. It's a tragedy for the victim's family, for Mangione's family, and for everyone who might wonder if this could have been prevented. The line from frustration to violence is not straightforward, but the environment in which he festered was not neutral. It was an environment pushing certain messages, reinforcing certain beliefs, making it harder to find reasoned discourse and empathy. We can't undo what happened, but we can prevent future cases by acknowledging that algorithms play a significant role in shaping public sentiment and individual perceptions. By learning from this event, we might reduce the chance of another person taking such a destructive path. This is not the end of the conversation. No, not by a long shot. Far from it. Think of this video as a starting point, a moment of awareness. You now know how easy it is for digital systems to push someone toward extremism, how crucial it is to consume content consciously, and how we might collectively hold platforms accountable. If this resonates with you, share it with someone who might benefit. Start a conversation about media literacy, about balancing your information diet, about resisting extremist narratives. Encourage your friends, family, and colleagues to be mindful of what they consume. And remember, you're not broken or powerless. You're just living in a time of massive change, where human psychology and technology are intertwined in complex ways. With conscious effort, we can shape these tools to serve us, not destroy us. So, here's the bottom line. If this video gets any real traction, if it starts racking up views and engagement, I'm gonna push this even further. You think what you've heard so far about algorithmic manipulation and radicalization is wild? Just wait until we dive deeper. I'm talking about digging into the craziest stories behind how these big corporations and their platforms shape minds, the way shady operators twist public sentiment, and yes, even more jaw-dropping examples than Luigi Mangione's case. Stories that sound too outrageous to be true, but trust me, they're out there, waiting for their moment in the spotlight. But here's the deal. I need to see you're actually interested. One of those prove this matters situations. If the view count spikes, if the comments light up, if you slam that like button and subscribe, I'll start pulling back the curtain on even more unbelievable narratives. I'm talking about stuff that'll make true crime documentaries look tame. This isn't just another video, it's a call to arms. If you want me to blow the lid off these hidden stories, then I need you to make noise. Like, hell yes. Comment, absolutely. Subscribe, non-negotiable. And don't stop there. Spread this everywhere. I need a full-scale digital assault. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, text your friends, slide into DMs. The YouTube algorithm is a fickle beast, and it only respects one thing: engagement. Every share, every thumbs up, every hell yes in the comments sends up a signal flare telling the system this content matters. So let's use the algorithm to fight against the algorithm. Are you in or out? If you want more revelations, more shocking truths, then prove it. Turn this video into a digital wildfire, and let's force the algorithms to give us the stage we deserve. It's your move.